Sindy Reddy. I'm a past national president for Women's Council in 2015, and it's so great to see all of you on this call. And one of the things that we talk about so often is that if you can run a smooth meeting and your board or whatever meeting you're running, if everybody feels good about the meeting, you get more accomplished. And so my promise to you today is we're going to keep it simple and we're going to go over 5 easy steps to do a great meeting. So are you guys all game for that? Let me have the jazz hands if we're game for that. All right. Okay, so we all have been in meetings where, first of all, we're talking about Zoom. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people are zoomed out. But more so than that, think back to going to an in-person meeting, and what was the situation in that in-person meeting? Were you like this person in this picture going, oh my God, if I have to be in this meeting for another 5 seconds, I'm going to go crazy? Or were you in a situation where you were looking back going, really, do we have to talk about this again over and over and over? I'm hearing the same things over and over. So what I'm going to teach you today is how to run a meeting so that everybody is on board and you get through your agenda quickly and you accomplish what you need to accomplish. So are you guys excited about that? All right, so let's have some fun here. The first step is planning. And okay, you guys are probably just rolling your eyes going, oh yeah, planning. Well, if you're doing something for your local association, you have staff that helps with planning. But in Women's Council, we are the planners, right? And so we have to plan our own meetings. So having a template for your agenda that you use every time you do a meeting, that's an important piece of the planning, and making sure that everybody on your board gets whatever you want them to read ahead of time and does their homework. Because if you wait until your meeting to try and let them sit there and read stuff, it doesn't go smoothly. That's one of those meetings where you're like going crazy. So what you want to do is about a week before your board meeting, you want to send out your agenda and you want to send out any package of information that you want everybody to go over during the meeting. That way, if they have questions, they can email you or call you ahead of time and you can make sure everyone's on the same page at the same time. So planning is going to be the first thing we're going to talk about. The other part of planning that's so important is preparing your team. And I know a lot of you guys are getting ready to start doing some type of training for your team. Maybe you're going to do a retreat. This is something that's really key, is to talk about expectations. If you expect them to read that packet ahead of time and read it and make sure they have their questions answered and come prepared to the meetings, then you need to let them know that. We can't assume that people are going to just do that. One of the things that as leaders sometimes we make a mistake on is we forget to tell people what the expectation is, and then we get irritated that they didn't do something we thought they should do. But the reality is, if they didn't know that they were supposed to do that, you can't get mad at them. Okay, we can't be upset if we didn't tell them what the expectations are. So telling people that you want them to be there on time, whether it's on Zoom or in person, telling people you're going to end on time and respecting their time, those are really key. And then any other rules of the day that you're going to use consistently. Like for me, I always tell everybody to turn their cell phone on stun or off, turn it upside down so they can't see the text messages coming in. And just be present for the 1 hour time frame or 1.5 hour, whatever you normally do on your board meetings or your meetings. So you want them to be engaged and you want them to be focused while they're there. Some other interesting things about Zoom is sometimes somebody will be driving. Have you seen anybody on Zoom that's been driving? So the problem with that is, first of all, whose liability is it if they're on a meeting that was mandatory for a board and then they get in an accident because they had their Zoom on their phone? So I just try to say to people, look, if you're going to be in your car, be parked. And you can sit in your car, it doesn't matter where you're at, but don't be driving, because that's a dangerous thing for them and we don't want the liability on it. So little things that we have to think differently on now that we're doing, now that we're in this situation where we're actually doing the Zoom so much. All right, so here's my secret weapons. My secret weapons are doing an agenda. Some people go, oh, we're so casual here, we don't need to do an agenda. So you guys all know, you can put into the chat what you think happens when you don't have an agenda, because you all know, like you go off the railroad, like you are on the railroad track, and then whew, you are off the railroad track if you don't have an agenda. And some people go, I don't understand why my meeting takes so long. We have 4-hour board meetings. And I'm like, it's because you don't have an agenda. And if you have big time constraints, you may even want to time your agenda. And if I don't know if you've ever seen an agenda like that, but they'll say meeting starts at 10 a.m. Then we do the pledge at 10:01, and we do the inspiration at 10:05, and they list it all the way down. The other thing you can do in an agenda is you can do a consent agenda. That's kind of a weird terminology, but what that means is any items that don't have action of the board, they're not going to require a motion or a vote or discussion, that the group can just do simply all in one lump. So you're chunking out these things that don't need action. That's called a consent agenda. So at the top of your agenda, after you do your, welcome and your pledge and anything else you're doing there, you can do a consent agenda and get one motion to approve everything on the consent agenda. Those could be like committee reports, that could be your minutes from the last meeting, things that don't need action. And by action, I mean not something that requires a vote. So if you have a committee that brings forward a recommendation to your board, or is bringing forward something they want you to vote on, that could not be on the consent agenda. Does everybody understand that piece of it, the consent agenda piece? And if we need to have side conversations after this class, I'm happy to talk to any of you guys individually. So don't hesitate to reach out to me, okay? All right, so consent agenda. The next thing is having a gavel. I know that sounds funny, but the gavel allows you to start and stop your meeting. And if you have to get somebody's attention, if there's too much noise in the room, you can use it. You don't want to use it to hit anybody over the head. You're not trying to do that. You're just trying to control your meeting. And so having that gavel and it doesn't have to be a huge expense to the network. You can just get one gavel and pass it on year after year after year. It doesn't have to be a huge expense. The other thing that's my secret weapon, and the thing I love the most, is Robert's Rules of Order. And I know you guys are like, you are sick, Cindy. You are sick that you actually like Robert's Rules of Order. But we're going to go over some things that are very basic tips on that to help you guys feel comfortable with that. Who else uses Robert's Rules and really feels comfortable with it? All right, we've got some people that are enjoying using Robert's Rules. Well, we're going to actually practice using Robert's Rules a little bit in this class, so we'll be doing some of that. All right, so step number 2 is is very simple, and I know this sounds so silly, but be on time for your meetings. Have you guys ever been in a meeting where the person running the meeting comes running in the door? They're all flustered. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm so late. And it just starts your meeting with the wrong energy level. Do you guys remember feeling like that if you've ever been in that situation? So you as the leader need to say to yourself, I'm going to be there 15 minutes early, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's in person. You're going to be there 15 minutes early, and you're going to clear your head and be in place at the time the meeting starts. That's how you can start your meetings on time. Starting a meeting on time and ending on time shows respect to everybody on your board. And so that is really key. Now, we are so bad in real estate because what do? We jam pack 25 things into, oh, I have another 15 minutes. I can make 3 more calls to clients, or I can go show 1 more house before I run over to my board meeting. And what I'm saying to you is, on the day of your board meeting, give yourself permission to block out some time, and on your calendar, time block it 15 minutes early, 15 minutes after. Then you'll have time to meet with anybody that has questions after the meeting, and you're not feeling stressed about, oh my gosh, I have to leave now and we're not even done with our meeting yet. So starting on time, ending on time, that really sets a positive tone, and it shows your board that you are committed to them, and they in turn will be committed to you. Does that make sense? Stay on your agenda. You can let your people know as one of the expectations, if they have something they want to add to the agenda, they need to get it to you, like let's say 7 days before the meeting or whatever time frame, so that you have time to put it on the agenda and then get it out to the group for review with any packet of information you want them to review. If you train your board to understand that if they need something to be discussed, they should bring it to you in advance and you can put it on the agenda, that helps them start thinking ahead on what preparation do they need on the actual topic. So that works really well too. And then again, just the ending on time thing, if they know you're going to start on time and end on time, they're going to be there on time and they're going to really feel the respect that you're showing them by ending on time. So I know that seems like a really simple thing, but in reality, it's huge because I am just as bad as you guys from the point of view of I want to jam 2 more things in just really quick before my meeting. So again, just keep that in mind and time block yourself for your meetings. And if you time block it out for the year for your board meetings and you add that 15 minutes in there, you'll be amazed how you can manage your schedule around that. So it's not that hard to do, and ask your board to do the same thing. Okay. So when you run your meeting, you need tools. And we talked already about the gavel, but in reality, what we're trying to do by using Robert's Rules of Order is we're trying to be fair and equal so that everybody feels like any issue that we're talking about, we've heard the pros, we've heard the cons, we've heard everybody's side of the story, and then we come to a consensus. So we want to be fair and equal. And the only way that we can really do that and do a good job at it is for your whole team to understand how to make a motion. And so we're going to spend some time kind of talking about how to make a motion. And then you can practice that with your team ahead of time so that they feel comfortable. Because have you ever been in a meeting where somebody, you know, somebody has something to say, but they don't really feel comfortable with asking, so they don't say anything. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want people to not feel like they can voice their opinion, but we also want to control so everybody understands what was the motion that we asked, and then have a discussion about it. And we're going to go through those steps. So I just want you guys to know we are going to go through them. But taking time at your retreat to teach them how to do a motion is going to make them feel more comfortable with the process. So why do we make a motion? Is anybody, let's put some stuff in chat, you guys. What do you think? How do we? Okay, so it's basically because we want everybody to be clear of what is the issue that we want to talk about. So in making a motion, you're asking one person to bring their point up in the form of a motion. I move that we, and then whatever the motion is. And we're going to practice a motion so you guys will get an idea of how to do this. So another member then has to do what? They have to second it. Okay, this is the thing that I want you guys to really think about. And this was the light bulb moment for me that helped me understand making a motion. Okay, here's the cool thing for you running this meeting. If you don't have somebody in the meeting second it, then you don't have to talk about it. So what I'm saying is somebody makes a motion and then somebody seconds it. Now, here's the thing you want your team to understand. If they don't like the motion, they should not that they don't like it, but if they don't feel it's valuable enough to discuss, then they shouldn't be seconding it. Sometimes we get into meetings and people, so somebody makes a motion and then everybody in the room goes second, 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 because they know that's what they should do. But the point you want your board to know is that they should not second something unless they feel it's worth talking about. That's the best way to say it to them. If you don't think it's worth the time for us to talk about it, don't second it. You can disagree or agree with a motion and second it, but you're just saying, hey, yeah, that's an interesting topic. I think that we should take the time to talk about it. And then you say seconds. So for me, I was like, wow. So if somebody doesn't second it, we just move on in our agenda. The motion fails, there was no second, and we move on. We don't have to waste time on it. Like, what if somebody were to say something really bizarre, like, let's change the name of our network? And we all know we can't do that because it's a national women's council. It's in our bylaws. We can't change our name. We can't say we're some other name. So, okay, so everybody in the room's like, wow, that is not worth even talking about because we have no control over that. That would be something you wouldn't second. Everybody get that? Let's do some jazz hands. Okay, nobody seconds it. We just move on and we save ourselves about 20 minutes of time on a discussion on something. All right. Now, so somebody's made a motion, somebody seconds it. That doesn't mean they agree with it. It just means they're thinking, yeah, this is worth us talking about. And then then the chair, let's pretend I'm the chair, says, let's have discussion. And then the group discusses back and forth. Everybody gives their point of view. And once the chair, which would be you guys, feels like you've had enough discussion, you've heard the pros and cons, and the group seems to be ready to vote, then you call for the vote. And we'll practice this, but I just want you to understand the steps, okay? A motion gets made, it gets seconded. Then if it's seconded, it gets discussed. And then once the discussion's done, we vote on it, okay? All right, so we're gonna, oops, what did I do here? Okay. Just trying to get back in here.
Down on the bottom left, there's the arrows.
Oh, thank you. All right, so here's our example, and I'm gonna need 4 volunteers. So I cannot see everybody. Can you guys mute yourselves? I need 4 people that are willing to read the screen. So you've got very simple parts. There's nothing to stress out about. I just need 4 people to volunteer.
I'll help you, Miss Cindy. This is Claudia Gaitan from El Paso. I'll help you.
Okay, so you're going to be number 1. So when you see the word, you see the number 1 and some words, you're going to read them on the screens as we go, okay?
Got
I
it.
think Shirley Jackson.
Annapolis, Gabby, if you need me.
Okay, Gabby, you're going to be number 2. And
Shirley Jackson.
Sherry, you're going to be number 3.
Tammy from Boise.
Okay, do I have another Gabby? Do I have 2 Gabbies?
Tammy from Boise.
Gabby, did I give you number 2?
No, Tammy.
Okay, all right, so Tammy, you're going to be number 3. Who's 1? Who's my 1? Because you guys, I don't.
Claudia is 1.
Okay, and who's 2? Who's 2? No 2 yet?
Yes,
There-
Shirley Jackson. You said
Shirley.
Sherry, but you
I'm
meant
sorry.
Shirley.
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
I'm number 3. Shirley
Yeah.
Jackson is number 3.
Gabby Gabrielle Roush is number 2.
Okay, so Gabby is number 2, and I need a 4. And I've got Shirley as 3, and I need a 4. Deanna Weaver, are you going to be my 4? Yes. Say
I
yes.
can be your number 4, Cindy. You know I'm your number 1 though, right?
All right. Okay, you guys. So we've got Claudia, Gabby, Shirley, and Deanna as my 4 volunteers. And if you see your number on the screen, you're just going to read your part as we go through this, okay?
Okay.
So we're going to
Got it.
first practice a basic motion. That's the first thing that we're going to do is a basic motion. All right, so I'm the chair. So that's me over on the left where it says chair, and the rest of you guys are all around our table. Okay, so we're going to go through this discussion. This is going to be a basic motion. All right. Here's my number 1.
I move that we offer 2 free continuing education classes per month for our members.
Okay.
I
then-
second it.
Perfect, Gabby. So I say now we're open for discussion. And then number 3.
Discussion, yeah. There are so many free continuing education classes out there. Will members come?
We looked into the cost and we can afford it. It would be about $5,000 a year. We can fit that in the budget.
Okay, so let's pretend we're going back and forth on the discussion. And then I say, seeing no further discussion, I call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Okay, so that's a basic motion. Everybody feel comfortable with the kind of the basic steps on that? Because we had a motion, we had a second, we had discussion, and then we voted on it. Now, the part that gets a little bit more interesting is when we have to do some kind of change in a motion, right? Like an motion and something comes up. So we're going to practice that. So if we have to do a motion with an amendment, and I'm going to use the same 4 volunteers, you guys, just for the sake of time. So let's do a motion with an amendment.
I move that we hold a fundraiser for our member relief fund on November 22nd, 2021.
I second it.
I think the fundraiser is a great idea.
Me too, but the date is too close to Thanksgiving. We need a different date.
Okay, so this is the part as a leader in a meeting where, what do? You go, oh crap, like, shoot, we didn't think about that. And now we're in the middle of a motion and we have to make a change. So now we're gonna continue forward with that on how we would handle an amendment to a motion.
I amend my motion to hold a fundraiser for our member relief fund on November 5th, 2021.
Okay, so now we've had the person who made the original motion, she changed her motion. It doesn't have to be her that makes the motion to amend, but you may have heard the term friendly amendment. That's what that is, when the person who made the motion agrees to change it. So that's what we had there.
I second the amendment.
I think that date will work great.
I agree.
Okay, so now we've had that discussion, and as a chair, I'm going to say, seeing no further objections to the amendment, I'm going to call for the vote on the amendment to change the date to the 5th of November, 2021.
Question, is this called an amendment already, or is it called a motion?
So they're both motions, but this is, what we're doing is chunking it out. So we have a motion and now we had to change it. So internally within that motion, we're making another motion to amend. So the amendment to the motion, we would vote on that. So now I would say, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. So that the motion to amend the original motion has passed. Now we're going to take it back. So all we're doing is chunking this out now. We've just made the vote to change the date. And so I have to repeat the motion because now it's been amended. So I say that I'm going to repeat the motion as amended. And that we will hold a fundraiser for our member relief fund on November 5th, 2021. Any further discussion? So we have changed the original motion. We have to vote on that original motion because we haven't voted on the big motion yet. Okay, so do we have any further discussion on that? And very likely we won't, because we've already agreed to the change to that. So if we had discussion, we would have it, but if we don't, then I just say, seeing none, we will move forward to the vote on the motion. And it's the amended motion. So the amended motion is, again, to hold the fundraiser on November 5th, 2021. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. All right, seeing none, the motion as amended passes.
Cindy,
Yeah.
this is Marlo Howard in the Kansas City area. I was wondering, is there something in the Roberts rules, or is it just something I'm thinking that I've done in other groups, where when it concerns money on a motion that you see a raise of hands, or can it be verbal?
It can be verbal. There's no requirement on it. Now, you could, within your own organization, have a standing rule or a bylaw that says that it has to be a hand vote or a ballot if it is related to money. But
Right.
it's not a firm requirement at
Okay.
all.
I couldn't remember. I've studied Robert's rules, but it's been a while. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Cindy, can I ask a question? It's Nancy Hertz in the Empire Westchester Network in New York.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you. I've seen scenarios where the discussion occurs before the motion is made. Do you want to opine on that?
Yeah, you really don't want to do that.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that you don't know if two people want to talk about it. Okay, so just think about that. It's the very basics of somebody makes a motion, and it's a very easy nature for people to start wanting to talk about it right away. But if you say, do I have a second? and nobody responds, then you say, seeing none, we're moving on with our agenda, the motion fails. Because there's nothing to talk about. So you want the formality of a motion and a second, and then going into discussion. Now,
Okay.
if it's coming out of a committee, so sometimes at your network level, you may not have this happen, but if it comes out of a committee where a group has already been talking about it and they're bringing forward a recommendation to your board that they think you should do something, let's say it's your fundraising committee and they are bringing forward a recommendation, you've already had at least 2 people want to talk about that. So you don't really have to have a second when it's coming out of a committee. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes,
It's
it
all
does.
about-
Thank you very
it's
much.
all about this whole thing, which is, to me, again, is a light bulb moment, and it will be for your board members too. If you don't have 2 people that want to talk about something, we don't need to talk about it. We just move on, and it's
Okay.
not disrespectful. It's just a point of fact that if we don't have 2 people to talk about something, we don't move on. That's why the second has always been there.
Great.
It's just that nobody's ever
Maybe
told
turn
us
that
that, right?
from beach.
Nobody's ever told
in.
us a second means at least 2 people need to want to talk about it. That's all that is. So that to
Thank
me
you.
is cool.
Cindy,
Now-
can I
go
ask a
ahead.
question?
Yeah,
If a committee gives you a report and it has a motion in it that they want to spend $200 on something, it's already in the budget.
No,
And if at that point, does the director need to say, move to approve that motion? Do we need a second on that? Or is the motion already on the floor because it's coming from committee?
it's already on the, well, you could still, we're going to still bring the motion forward, and but it does not need a second because it's coming out of committee. So, but you would still formalize it in bringing it forward as a motion, and then the group would talk about it. Obviously, the notes from the committee would be there, or maybe even your committee chair might be there to discuss with you guys what it is they're trying to do. And then after that, you would vote. Now, if a committee member is there to discuss it and they are not a part of your board, then they can be in the room to discuss with you guys. And then once you go to a vote, then you ask them to step out of the room because they would not be there for an executive session where it's the board members only voting. If you have a setup in your own network where you just say to your members, you're welcome to be at any board meeting, you don't have to ask them to leave the room unless you feel like it's something that should only be discussed by the board members themselves, the directors, okay?
What are your feelings about recording meetings?
I don't necessarily think there's any need to do that. You have a secretary who would be taking notes, you know, somebody who's appointed to do that role. And really,
Colton.
there shouldn't be really any
Cold.
need for it to be, there shouldn't be any need for it to be recorded. Okay, this next page that you see in front of you, if you guys take a picture of the screen and you go to that QR code, it will bring up this page. It's actually a 2-page document, and it kind of has a little cheat sheet. You can share it with your board, or you can email me and I'll send it if you have any problem with the QR code. But what it is it basically says, what do you want to do? Then what should you say if you're making the motion? And then can you interrupt that motion? No or yes. And does it need a second? And then debate would be what we would call discussion. And then can you amend it? And then how do you, what's required on a vote? So it's a really good cheat sheet. Like if somebody wanted to move to close the meeting, they would say, I move that we adjourn. Can that be interrupted? No. Does it need a second? Yes. But like, okay, let's say you're at the very beginning of your meeting and somebody just says, I move that we adjourn. And you guys all know you still have business to do. Nobody should second it, right? You don't want to second it if you don't really think it's the thing to do. Now, if the meeting's gone on for an hour and a half and you're like, okay, it's time for us to adjourn, then yeah, sure, second it. And then let's vote on it and move forward. So that's a really good cheat sheet. And by the way, you guys, if anybody wants me to zoom in to any of your board meetings and go through this with your team as part of your retreat or whatever, I am more than happy to do that. So we can do a little shortened version of this session, and I'm happy to practice with your team. So we can have some fun with that. Okay, I'm going backwards on my slide, so excuse me for a minute. Okay, now step number 4 is dealing with difficult personalities. So the picture on the screen is a bar screen from the Star Wars movie. And the best thing that I can say to you is, just like on this Zoom call right now, we all look very normal. There's nobody on here that looks like they're having a, freak out in their head. We don't know what's going on in their lives. We don't know what stress they had. They may have had a cancellation first thing in the morning before your board meeting. They may be totally stressed out and you don't know it. So part of our job as leaders is to make sure that we are dealing with different personalities correctly and trying to help our group get together and work with one another. So I just say, think about the Star Wars movie and know that we are all kind of like aliens. We don't know what's going on with each other. We're all well-intended. We're all volunteer leaders, but we have a bazillion other things we're doing. And so just be respectful with one another when we're working on things. And we're going to go through some personality types and kind of talk about this. And you guys in the chat session can say if you think you're one of these types. So the analytical one, this is the person that likes to see the numbers. If you're going to go over budgeting stuff at this time of year, this is the person that you better be sending the stuff to a week in advance, because they're going to look at every number on every line and they want to understand. And that's how their brain processes information. It's not bad. It's not a negative thing at all. It's just the way they process information. How many of you guys have had an analytical personality on your board? Yeah, it's a good thing. But it's also important that you understand they're the ones that are going to have lots of questions. So if you give them the time ahead of time to analyze it and then ask you the questions up front, you're going to save yourself about half an hour in a board meeting of them going through and asking you questions. So you can be prepared for that and just plan for it and know that they're the person that's going to really be the one that's going to help you drill down on the details, but they're also, they just need a little time to process things. Okay, so the loud one, we all have these on our board. You guys have been in meetings. Yep, you can tell me, yes, you've had a loud one in your room. Sometimes this is a past president. Sometimes it's not a past president, but this is the person that feels like they have something to say on every single issue that you're going to talk about. And they like to hear themselves talk sometimes, but also they usually have something really good to say. It's just sometimes the way they say it frustrates everybody in the room. Have you guys, and you just shake your heads if you know what I'm talking about. All right, so the loud one, the way to handle somebody like that is to do some upfront ground rules. You can say to the group, when we're in discussion, if we have a long discussion going on, we are going to allow each of you on the board to speak one time, and then we're going to go through the rest of the board before we allow somebody to come back and speak a second time. That helps manage the expectation up front, because you don't need to be the bad guy. You just need to say to them, that's one of the rules of the day, and they all need to agree to your rules of the day. So that way you get to hear everybody that's on your board and you get a good balance of the pros and cons. Because if somebody's very passionate about something and they're like, we've tried that before and it's just never worked, and they're like going on and on about it, and you're like, okay, thank you so much for your input. We appreciate the historical information and we appreciate your comments, but let's see what everyone else has to say, and then you move on. You can also time comments if you need to, if you feel like you're really getting in a situation where somebody's really overstepping the time limit that they need. I'm not trying to rush somebody through comments, but I am trying to say to them, we are trying to be fair and equal, and we want to hear everybody's point of view. Okay, so the next one is the never happy person on your board. Has anybody ever dealt with somebody on there that everything is just always negative and they're just, now, if you really dig down deep beyond the fact that it always feels like they're negative, they usually have really good ideas. Sometimes they have very good points. It's just the way they say it sometimes is just so, you're like, really? And you're rolling your eyes. But if you hear what they say, and again, this is another person that we're going to let one person speak, and then we're going to let everyone else speak before we have somebody else come back in and speak. Okay, so we've talked about a few different ones. Now, the quiet one is probably your most, from a leader perspective, this is the person you want to pull out of their shell. It's not the most important person on your board, but it is important for you as a leader to make sure that they feel comfortable speaking and that they share their ideas. Because sometimes I know I'm that type of personality. I like if I'm in a new environment, I like to sit back and kind of get the lay of the land, see where things are falling, see what the temperament of the group is before I really step in and speak. And so it'll take me a little while, but then once I'm in, and I'm not afraid to say what I want to say. So sometimes you as a leader have to kind of look around the room and say, hey, Deanna, how do you feel about that? Or I see you nodding your head. What are you thinking? Share with the group your thoughts. You don't want to like put them on the spot and freak them out, but you also want to be inclusive. It's really important. I see you shaking your head. You probably have some great ideas to share with the group. Would you mind sharing? And so softly and gently, you pull them into the conversation, and you'll be amazed. Some of those people are going to be your strongest leaders down the way. I know you guys have all either felt that yourself, or you've been in a situation where you've seen somebody step up. So what we want to do in our board meetings is we want to laugh, we want to have some fun, we want to enjoy each other's company. You know, Gail Hartnett, who is a past national president, she always used to say, fun, or no deal. And so your job as leaders is to make sure your group wants to hang out with you for that hour and a half at the board meetings, and they are looking forward to it. And they're not going, oh my gosh, we got another board meeting. That's going to be 3 hours out of my day. So you want to make it efficient, fun, get them to know each other, have some fun with it. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about conflict management. Has anybody ever been in a situation with some conflict management where you were like, okay, I got to figure this out and I got to get everybody on the same page? Now, the deal on this is that you guys use conflict management every day when you're dealing with clients, whether you're working on repair requests for a client or some frustration a seller may have or whatever. You know how to deal with conflict management. It's just sometimes we forget to use those same skills when we are in a board meeting or working with our board. And so there's some conflict management stuff that we all need to deal with. Now, I have this little trick that I do, and I do this in my personal life, and I do this in my professional life, and I do this in my leadership roles. It's called B.A.R, and it's not representative of drinking at the bar, although some days when you're in a stressful, conflict management situation, you want to drink at a bar, but that's not what it is. But the acronym first means breathe, and then acknowledge and respond. So what I mean by that is when somebody is yelling at you or someone else, the first thing we all need to do rather than be reactive is just take a deep breath. So I want you guys all to take a deep breath with me right now. So ready? Okay, did you feel yourself relax just a little bit? And then the second piece of this is to acknowledge. When somebody is angry, what they're really saying to you is they want to be heard. They want you to hear them. And so that is the simplest next step, is to just acknowledge them. So how you do that, you got to use your own words. You got to use words you feel comfortable with so it doesn't sound robotic. But you could say something like, I hear what you're saying. I understand your concerns. You know, it just depends on your own verbiage, because you don't want it to sound like, I understand your concerns, or I hear what you are saying. Like, it needs to just be natural for you. I hear you, I understand what you're saying. And then once you acknowledge that, they tend to take a little bit of a step back, and then you can respond. So the response can be a lot of different things. The response can be, I'm going to look into this and I will get right back to you. Now, if you are looking into something for someone, you have to get back to them at whatever time you say, whether I'll get back to you tomorrow on this, I'm going to do a little research on it, I promise I'll get back to you. Or it may mean if you have a conflict with 2 different people on your board that you want to talk to each of them individually, and then maybe get together with all of them for a conversation. But these 3 steps are very simple ways that you can actually take control of a situation if you have somebody who's angry. Now, if you're running a very smooth meeting and you're staying on your agenda, it's very unlikely that you're going to get a ton of conflict unless you're in the middle of discussions on emotion. And then you, as the leader of the group, can say to whoever is starting to raise their voice, we hear what you're saying, we understand your point of view, and we're going to move forward. Is there anybody who has a is speaking for the motion, and you kind of move away from that discussion. But then after the meeting, you may have to go back and have an individual conversation. But this little trick of raising the bar, that's what I always say, raise the bar, the B.A.R is a real easy trick. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Zoom, because that's what we've been dealing with all year. And as the president of the Scottsdale Association, I can tell you I've learned some really interesting things about doing a meeting on Zoom versus doing a meeting in person. So I talked to you about this already, but no driving. Like, really, seriously, nobody should be driving if they're on your board meeting. And you can just tell them, there's no way that they can look at, like, if you're going to put something up on the screen that you want them to review, they can't see that. They can't see the reactions of other people on their screen. So it's okay if they're in the car. It's okay if they're sitting somewhere else. They could be in a parking lot, but you don't want them to actually be driving while they're on your meeting. There's just too much liability and danger, and we care about them enough that we don't want them to be doing that. So I always ask everybody to have their video on and lighting in front of them so that we don't look like we're in the witness protection plan. And now that we've been doing Zoom for several months, I think everybody's pretty much figuring out their lighting and all of that. But when you're in a board meeting, your focus needs to be on the board agenda, and you promise them you're going to keep it to an hour or an hour and a half if you have a really long agenda. But you ask them to be on their video and not to have another screen going over here and not to be texting on their phone at the same time. You ask them to engage and be a part of the group. And you don't have to be bossy about it. You just have to be, just upfront, say, these are going to be our rules of the day. And do I have everybody's agreement on the rules of the day? So now, slow down as you do discussion when you're on Zoom. So if you have a motion and you have a second, and then you go to discussion, what happens on Zoom is people either have themselves muted, or they are, they're not sure they want to say anything on a motion. And so what I learned early on was, like, we'd have a motion, we'd have a second. I'd say, any discussion? I'd say, okay, seeing no discussion, let's move to vote. And what I wasn't realizing was that I needed to take a little more time to make sure everybody who wanted to say something, did say something.
98.7.
So what we're doing is, you're just saying to everybody, okay, I want you all to take yourselves off mute. And then anybody who has any comments regarding this motion, please raise your hand and we'll discuss. And then you give it a little bit of time. It just takes a few more minutes, and then you'll be amazed at how many people will want to discuss it. If you feel like it's a motion that needs some discussion, but nobody's making any comments, then you may say, okay, what I'd like to do is go around the room and just have each of you say a quick thought about this motion. So you have to kind of pull the conversation in with Zoom, where before in a boardroom, it would be more natural for them to just discuss with everyone. Do you guys see how that can change things? And then, again, ask for opinions. If you don't feel like they're responding, you can just be saying something, like, hey, Dee, what are your thoughts on that? And you just kind of get them going. Once one or two people start talking, the rest of the group tends to follow. But don't just assume because they are not discussing right away that they don't have something to say. And then you can use breakouts in Zoom. You can use breakouts. If it's a big, hairy discussion, you could take 3 people and put them in one breakout, 3 people, put them in one breakout, and then let them talk, and then bring them back together and share what they're sharing, what they talked about in their little breakout for 10 minutes or something. So there's ways to use the breakout feature in Zoom in a lot of different ways. If you're doing strategic planning or things like that, the breakouts work really well on that. So great leaders start off as great followers. And the reason that I put this slide in there is because this is the time of the year where we really need to focus on transitions between our current president and our president for 2021. And we need to be supportive of one another. So the presidents need to be supportive of the president-elects who are now moving into their new role as president shortly. And you need to work together as a team for the rest of the year. And then as a past president, we step back into a follower role and we're there for support. And we want to be there for support. We have a lot of background and knowledge that can help the network, but we don't want to be like bossy or like, it's still my year, I'm president until the end of the year. You want to just, as a team, show your team how supportive you guys are for the year coming forward so that it's a seamless transition. That can make all the difference in the world. And believe me, your members of your board and your members of your network are going to understand that and see, they're going to go, my gosh, you guys did an amazing job of transitioning this year. It just was seamless. And that's what we want to have happen. So now you're ready to do a meeting like a pro, but I know you guys probably have some questions. So I wanted to leave us a little bit of time. We've got about 15 minutes here to really talk about, even if you have a specific situation and you want to talk about it and get some suggestions, you can remain nameless in regard to who and what, but if you guys want to unmute and ask a question, please feel free to do that.
Cindy, I was just going to ask you, this is Lisa Chamberlain from Maryland.
Yeah.
How would we get in touch with you if we would like you to participate in our fall leadership summit?
So you can reach me if you go to Sindy, S-I-N-D-Y at azgreathomes.com. Let me see, I can go back to my first screen real quick and you guys can just click a picture of that. And also this slideshow, if you guys need it, I'm happy to share. Let me just go back to the first one that's got my data on it. And my cell phone, you can text me, but I'm happy to come with you guys and help, because sometimes just having somebody from the outside, can you see everything in the right-hand corner down there?
Yes, thank you.
So just, click a picture of that and let's get in touch. I'm really happy to help you guys any way I can. And sometimes just practicing it does help. Now, I've had a couple questions when I've done this class about what if somebody doesn't want to vote or they feel like there's a conflict of interest, like if sometimes if it's related to money and somebody's brother is the president of the company that you're going to hire to do something, like you want to, not vote on something. And that is totally something that you can do. So you don't have to vote but you would want to you would raise your hand and say, Madam Chair, I have a conflict of interest on this and I'm not going to be voting. Okay, so you want to just not vote if you have a situation like that. What other questions? I can only see a few of you on my screen. So what are some of the other questions you guys have? I'm sure you must have some situations.
Cindy, this is
Yeah.
Kristen Olson with Indianapolis Network. How are you? Thank you so
Good.
much for today.
You bet.
I am one of those weirdos that likes Robert's rules.
All
I
right.
actually got it as a Christmas gift exchange, and I wouldn't let anybody steal my book back. And they were like, she's so weird, but I love it. So here's my thing. We have a new board upcoming. A few of them have not served with Women's Council before. And I know from serving with them on past boards in different areas that they don't like Robert's rules. They find it boring. They find it not fun. And it drives me crazy because I find that when we follow Robert's rules, it keeps us exactly on track and in the place that we need to be. And I sort of trying to explain that I feel, it's my personal opinion, that I feel when I'm in a Women's Council meeting, I am with the strongest group of professionals that I could possibly be with. I hold all of my members and fellow realtors that are in my room at a higher standard because I know that they're much more educated in our field and they have such an array of backgrounds to just the knowledge is just immense. And I don't know if everybody sees it the way that I do. So maybe I do drink the Kool-Aid too much. I don't know if there's such thing, but
there's really a happy balance of making them understand. Yeah, if you were to hand them all a Robert's Rules of Order book and go, okay, read this, they'd be like, oh my God, hang me, right? But the reality is if they just learn how to do a motion, they will understand the importance of this, because and you can even turn it around. Look, the reason we use Robert's rules is number one, so we have some direction, and number two, so that I respect your time. You know, we're respecting everyone in the room's time, and we move through our agenda much quicker. And the other piece of the puzzle is it allows us to be fair and equal on an issue. What it does is it just, rather than it being chaos in discussion, you're stating what you're going to talk about. At least two people have to talk about it, and then you're going to have some discussion on it. And it controls that step so that people don't go. I mean, we've all been in meetings where you were like, you zoned out for a few seconds, and then you come back and you're like, okay, I really have no idea what we're talking about right now. Like I totally zoned out for a few seconds, and now I'm back. I'm just zoomed out. So the problem is, this allows you to chunk it out and then to stay on track, just like you said. So it's about how you sell it. And if you make it what's in it for me, what's in it for them is the meeting's going to move faster, and you are going to have some fun because you'll have time to have some fun. And the fun piece of it, you have to figure out for your own dynamic of your group. But sometimes you could do something at the very beginning of the meeting every week where you say, you know, okay, it's in the summertime, who had the best summer vacation, or who has the best Thanksgiving plan, or, you know, you try and do something where you get everybody to answer one fun question in a poll or something like that, and then you have a conversation about it. So, you know, you want to start getting them to know each other a little deeper, and those are the kind of little tiny things that you can do at the beginning of your meeting to help with that. So, and if you want, you know, if you want me to come and talk to your group, maybe I can convince them that it's not just you that loves Robert's rules. Maybe if they see two of us, they'll give in. So the other little tip or trick that there's two other things I want to just share with you. There is something called a parking lot. Has anybody ever used that? So if you get into a situation where you do meetings and people start bringing up all kinds of random things to talk about, you can say, we have this piece of paper in the middle of the table. It's called our parking lot. And we're going to jot down any topics that we need to talk about that aren't on the agenda. And at the end of the meeting, if we have time, we'll look at what's on the parking lot. If we have time to talk about it, we'll add it in. If we don't, it'll go on next month's agenda. So that allows you to control that piece too. So a parking lot is a really good tool. And then just remember the thing that Women's Council has been telling us for years, which is the task is to ask. So ask your members to be committed to being there on time. Ask your board members to prepare and read the materials up front and have their questions ready. Ask them to volunteer to do whatever you need them to do. Once you ask, that's how we all got involved in leadership. Somebody asked us to do it, right? So again, it's giving them the right expectations. So 5 easy steps to making sure you're doing your meeting smooth. I really think you guys have the skills that you need. And if you want me to do this with your group, I'm more than happy to do that. So looking forward to that. And do we have any other questions? I think we've got about 6 minutes. So anybody have a situation they want to share without the names, and we can talk through something?
Hello, I'm Renee Smith. I'm with the St. Lucie Network.
Hey, Renee.
And I'm glad I sat through this because I've realized that we have actually not been holding our meetings correctly, because we make a motion after we have the discussion. And then after we have the discussion, we make the motion, and then we just say second. And then after second, we go, aye.
Right.
So it's like, that was totally all wrong after sitting through this. So thank you so much for this.
Sure. So, I mean, so the problem with doing it the way you guys are doing it is that you may or may not even understand what you're discussing. Like who knows what it is we're really talking about if you don't have a motion on the table.
Yeah, and the discussion goes a lot longer than it should.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, our last meeting was 3 hours long, and I was just like, why is this meeting so long? Because we did more discussion, and then after we discussed everything, then we made a motion, and then and then after we made the motion, it was like, any discussion? And of course we didn't have a discussion. We already discussed it. So
Exactly.
Now I understand. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
You bet, you bet. And you know what? You guys are not alone. A lot of groups do that. But that's why you have 3-hour meetings, and that's why you shouldn't, there's very rare situations where your meetings should go any longer than an hour and a half. And truly, if you really follow an agenda, it's not that you want to rush through things and not discuss them completely, but if you follow an agenda, you should be able to do it in an hour to an hour and a half at the very most. So totally the agenda piece of this, and here's a little trick on agendas. What I like to do is formalize the agenda with everything that I'm going to give to my board members. And then I copy that agenda over and I call it in my Dropbox Cindy's agenda. And then in red, I put all the things under each of those agenda items that I don't want to miss. Like if I have a dignitary coming to the meeting that I need to announce, or if I have some other information that I want to share, I put it in red underneath the bullet points in the order that the agenda goes. So I have my own little cheat sheet agenda. But the other thing that I'll do, and this I do even if I'm not the chair of a meeting, even if I'm on a committee, is let's say the meeting's from 10 to 11. I block out from 11 to 11:15 in my own schedule. So when the meeting's over and I click off of the meeting or I walk out of the meeting room, I sit down somewhere and I do a lot of the work that I promised I would do. Like if I volunteered for something, I do it then. I jot it down, I make my notes, I put it on my schedule, whatever I need to do. I maybe do a little bit of research. You would be amazed how much time you can save yourself by doing what you said you were going to volunteer for immediately after a meeting. Because what happens when we wait 2 days? Oh my gosh, we're like, okay, I know I volunteered for something at that meeting and I can't remember what exactly it was I volunteered for. Or it makes it harder because all the great ideas you had in your head from the meeting are gone. And so you know, people will say, Cindy, gosh, how do you get done as much as you get done? And it's because I block out that extra time after the meeting to do that extra work. Does that make sense? So that's just a little, you can do that no matter whether you're a committee member, a board member, just involved at your church, wherever, just give yourself that extra time. And it's not that much more on your schedule to add 15 minutes in, but boy, it saves you probably 2 hours later of trying to figure out what was it that I was promising to do.
Cindy, can I ask 2 quick questions?
Sure, Marge. Go ahead.
One would be, hi. One would be when somebody tables something and then when you have an approved agenda and as the meeting goes along and somebody goes, oh my God, we totally forgot to do something or I want to add something. They can still add it to new business, can they not?
Yeah, so good point, Marge. So on your agenda, you're going to have old business, which might have something that carried over that was tabled. Like, let's say you had a motion on the table and the discussion's going on and you're like, okay, we're not getting anywhere. Maybe we need a little more research. Maybe you need to appoint a couple people at the table to go do a little research and bring it back at the next meeting. So that would be somebody moving to table the motion until the following meeting. And that motion would be separate. But then if you get, so then you have an old business and then you have a new business. And on the new business piece of it, if you have time on that, you can add something in new business. So there's no problem with doing that. That's what it's there for. So thank you, Margie. Yeah.
This is Gail Ayler. Thank you for doing this. Yeah. How are you? Great to see you.
Good to see
So
you.
3 things that have come up in the past that I don't remember how I answered them or handled them, but I know that they've come up is sometimes the officers ask if they can send a proxy in their absence because they know what's on the agenda for voting. And the second thing that's a little bit unusual is what do you do when someone abstains and you have a tie? How do you break the tie?
Okay.
And then I've heard some boards say that the president can't vote on certain topics.
That's correct. So you as the chair or the president cannot vote unless there's a tie. So you should not be voting on anything. And that allows you to control the room and not be in a situation where you are influencing the decision. You are managing the discussion and you vote only if there's a tie. Okay. Now, I'm going to try and remember the other questions. So that's the first thing, and that'll simplify the process.
Proxy.
So
was
if
one
you have,
question.
so the proxy piece of it is really, most boards do not allow you to vote by proxy. And that would be something that would have to be in the bylaws if it was allowed, and it usually is not allowed. So if you're voting on something and somebody can't attend, they cannot do a proxy, number one. Unless it's in your bylaws that it's allowed, but I don't believe any of Women's Council allows proxies. Some other organization might. And so therefore, if it's a tie again, you as the president are voting, but if there's proxy situations, you have to make sure you have the correct number of people. Like it's usually a majority that, you have to have a quorum. And I believe in our bylaws, it's typically around 25% of your board members have to be there before you can make. So if you don't have a quorum, you can't vote on anything. You're going to have to reschedule a special meeting for a vote. So it's important. Like, let's say you were doing a board meeting this week and everybody was already in other, governing board meetings for another organization or for the national organization today, then you would have to reschedule the meeting so that you could get a quorum. So.
That answered all the questions.
Awesome. All right, you guys, we are out of time, but I am so honored to serve with all of you. And I just want to say, again, reach back out to me. I am more than happy to do this by Zoom with anybody who wants to. We can do the full presentation or parts of it, whatever would be specific to your board. So let's have some fun this year. I know you guys have got some great retreats planned, and I know you're going to run amazing meetings. So thank you all. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Cindy.
All right. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, Cindy.
You bet.